So I'll pass things over to Lanna next. Go ahead, Lanna.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lanna, coming at you from Epiquick, which is the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples of PEI, also known as PEI. From Charlottetown today, where I live with my husband and 2 young kids. But before that, I used to live in Newfoundland. I'm very familiar with that Indian Bay watershed. I know exactly where that building is. So I am the program director with the Nature Conservancy of Canada here on PEI. We are a nationwide national charity. We are Canada's leading land conservation organization. So we are a land trust that operates across the country. I've been with NCC for 8 years next week, the first 5 of which I spent in St. John's, and now I work on PEI. So I have a thing for islands. I just hopped islands. So as a program director with the Nature Conservancy, I lead NCC's conservation work in the province, which is what I did in Newfoundland, which is what I do here. So I lead the conservation work here. So I don't necessarily only do philanthropy. It is an element of what I do. So oftentimes when you get hired into a charitable organization, you're told that everyone's a fundraiser. As much as what Darren had mentioned, you learn to adapt and sort of do it all. But there are people who work with the Nature Conservancy Canada whose main job is to fundraise for the organization. So we are a nationwide group. So there, like I said, there's over 350 people that work with NCC across the country. And so there's lots of people whose main job it is to focus on philanthropy or development is what we call it in our world. Yeah, so it's always been an element of our work. So and I was trying to think of sort of some of the pieces I could share around the fundraising element of what we do. So as a charity, our donors and our partners are crucial to our success. So we've been around for a really long time, almost 60 years. And so without sort of that support that we gain, we wouldn't be able to do our works either nationally or locally. And I'll talk about the difference between that a little bit and how difficult it is to struggle with that. So we engage all different types of donors, from corporate supporters, foundations, organizations, individuals, and governments. For instance, we're actually currently working within a public-private partnership with the Government of Canada. So this is something that the Nature Conservancy Canada has done a couple times. So right now we're working under one called the Natural Heritage Conservation Program. It's basically an opportunity for the NCC to have access to federal dollars to advance an initiative that the country feels really passionate about, which is the protection of Canada's natural spaces. So we're sort of a client, they sort of contract us out to achieve targets that they are aiming to achieve, which is, 30% by 2030. So they have these really ambitious conservation targets. And so they will, funnel money into organizations that help them meet their targets, of which NCC would be one of them. So we get to access federal dollars, which is incredible. We can only access them if we bring other money to the table. So it's kind of like a potluck. So you can't really eat unless you bring something to the table. So we still have to raise lots of dollars to unlock those funds. So we work with all the types of donors to be able to access those funds and to be able to do our work. We can share and collaborate with the NCC team across the country, but we primarily work within our region. So as long as I've been with NCC, I've worked in the Atlantic region. So we these 4 little provinces are over here doing our own thing. And so we belong to this sort of big brother organization, but we are in charge of delivering our own programs and funding our own funds. So, the work that we do here in Atlantic Canada is often funded by money that we raise here in Atlantic Canada, or maybe we're going to raise it with entities that have that Atlantic Canadian pull, that wish to be on the East Coast, live elsewhere, but they're going to invest in the East Coast. We've talked to a lot of people that do this too. So the work that we do here, so for instance, and this is kind of the difference of working with a national entity. So ideas and campaigns and fundraising campaigns will come out of our head office in Toronto or come out of some really big idea think tanks across the country. And then we need to take it and make it relevant to Atlantic Canada. And then I also need to take it and make it relevant to Prince Edward Island. And so you have this struggle to sort of make campaigns relevant and make them connect with people to where you are. So there's a benefit of having the support of a larger national entity, but you also have to come across as having grassroots types initiatives and still working locally. So this is something that we struggle with all the time, because obviously we're, for lack of a better word, sort of competing with other smaller island-based charities. And so people who are figuring out where to put their charitable dollars may not prioritize the Nature Conservancy Canada because we have Canada in our name. They think we're a government, they think we're bigger. And so we're always kind of navigating that space of local versus of bigger organizations. And so it's always something that we struggle with, is how to tell our stories locally and how to make them important locally. So I was listening this afternoon, some of the talks were so interesting, and it actually spurred on this this thought for me, which is obviously when we fundraise, our gold star is unrestricted funding. We love it whenever organizations or individuals, corporations, governments can just sort of give us money and then we get to go and put it where it's needed. We like it whenever our funders trust our science-driven process and they trust that we know what we're doing with their funds. But it's not how it always works, as you know, as you can imagine. So, a lot of the funding that we may receive from corporations, organizations, and mostly individuals like to invest in projects. They like to feel really connected to projects. So they like to know that their dollars went exactly to this item. And so often when you're fundraising for that item, it doesn't help you keep the lights on. It doesn't help you pay salaries. It doesn't help cover the admin fees. So it's something that we're dealing with all the time. We try to do a combination of both. So for instance, we may have a fundraising campaign where we're fundraising to conserve biodiversity in Canada. But then we may also have another mini campaign underway where we're asking people to help us protect this specific piece of land, these specific 100 acres. And we're trying to teach donors that we prefer the conserving biodiversity campaign, because then that allows us to have more movement in our work, and it just it gives us more just sort of ability to adapt and move. But oftentimes, it's those campaigns for the 100 acres that bring in certain donors or bring in new donors because they want to feel like their dollar went exactly to that property. So this is something we grapple with all the time. But all that to say, we take donor stewardship really seriously. We have people that work with NCC who are, this is their job. We do our best to bring them with us on our journey, to convince them that what they're doing is a good decision. But we also do really silly things like name boats after them. I have a boat on PEI. It's named after a donor. It was her wishes. So it really, she paid for the boat, so she wanted to name it. So it really just depends. And then I guess I'll end on this little note. So if I can think about some of the stories that we're telling now, is yes, that we're talking about the conservation of biodiversity and all those kind of things when we think about how we're fundraising for our work. But we also tell a lot of stories right now about connecting nature to mental health. And so this is sort of the direction of our language lately. And this is some of the conversations that we've definitely been having since COVID-19, and how people are seeking nature to as a space to spread out, to feel fulfilled. And so we do things sort of similar to what Darren was talking about, just to sort of get people in nature. And we think that if we get people outside and we get them loving nature, and we come up with things like backyard birding or nationwide bio blitzes and like all these initiatives that get people outside in the hopes that we create nature lovers. And when they, Christmas time rolls around and they're thinking about charitable giving, they're going to think about where are those nature organizations, because I love nature, so I'm going to invest in nature. And so we're trying to think about the sort of the full picture to create those long-term donors, so that they can continue to think about nature. And I think that people, when they think about where they want to give around Christmas, again, this is when I do my charitable giving. They might pick a nature organization, they might pick a social organization or an ocean one. And so we're trying to sort of plant seeds that people think about us. and they become longer term donors. Anyway, so that's a little bit about what we do.